All right, I'm going to unmute and start this. I think people are still kind of trickling in, but we've got a nice crowd. So let's get this going because we have a lot of fun stuff to talk about today. So hello, everyone. I'm Tony Freund. I'm the editorial director at First Dibs, and we're really excited to partner with the Black Interior Designers Network to help kick off its new monthly series called Expert Dialog. This is the very first one, but each month, the BIDN will organize their partners, allies, designers and industry experts to discuss new research, innovations, and business strategies with members of its network and followers who wish to join in on the discussion. So we're here today to launch the Expert Dialogue series with a discussion centered on the First Dibs Designer Trends Report, which is our annual survey that's completed by hundreds of interior designers from around the world. It's in its fourth year now, and the survey reflects the tastes of design experts informing the industry and consumers of the interiors trends we will likely see in 2021, whether it's the color we'll be splashing on our walls or the types of furniture and decorative objects we're currently gravitating toward. To help bring the data to life, and we're going to share some data in a moment, I'm thrilled that we're joined by two leading lights in the world of design, Bridget Romanek and Rafael de Cardenas. Among the privileges of overseeing the editorial content on First Dibs, which includes editing the weekly digital design magazine Introspective and the study blog, I also get to spearhead our annual First Dibs 50 celebration. It's a celebration of the 50 most influential interior designers who are particularly adept at deploying furniture, decorative objects, and fine art in creative and impactful ways. So no proud papa should pick favorites among his 50 children, but I have to admit, Bridget and Raphael are standouts really on any list, okay? Not just because of their deep knowledge about and appreciation for the decorative arts, but because of their, delightfully unique eyes and their fearless approach to decorating. Although we're here today to discuss trends, Bridget's and Raphael's work is really timeless, transcending trends, though certainly never oblivious to them. So let me briefly, formally introduce them to you, just for the 1.5 people out there who don't know who they are, and then we'll dive into the discussion. So LA-based Bridget Romanek is inspired by the skillful interiors and natural beauty she has experienced in the course of her travels, curating, and reading. She creates environments that are fresh, functional, and aesthetically alive, combining the design genre she loves in unexpected ways. Most importantly, her spaces reflect the cherished hopes and dreams of her clients while introducing them to new visions and ideas they might not have considered. So thank you for joining us, Bridget.
Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
And then we have the New York-based, globally focused interdisciplinary practice of Rafael de Cardenas, specializes in residential and commercial interiors, architecture, furniture design, art advisory services, and brand development. Raphael's work has a highly graphic and sculptural quality, reflecting influences as disparate as 17th century literature and 1980s movies. So, and Madonna, Blonde Ambition Tour, I think when Pilar profiled you for us a few years ago, I learned that about you. So I'm happy to see you, Raphael.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so unique to this year's results is the fact that the pandemic has dramatically shifted everybody's relationships with their homes. People are spending so much more time thinking about the spaces they love and would love to update, and also about how design helps them meet their everyday needs. So before we dive into the data, I'd be interested to just briefly hear from each of you about how you've looked at your own homes in a new light during this last, difficult year.
hmm
Bridget,
Well,
you want to start?
I'll jump in, but for me, I I love my home, and it's my canvas, and I'm always trying new things in my house and moving sofas, and that's a joke that my husband makes all the time, that he never knows where the sofa's going to be. So at this point, it's really dangerous because I'm just I'm here, I'm working from the house, I'm living here, working here. Having my life is really in my home, and so my library has become my office, but then I will make my dining room table also my office. But at the end of the day, I don't want that filled with so much junk because I do like for us to try to have a family meal. So I've really taken over the library in my home, and it's been great and amazing. But even I do this for a living, but it's taught me, this slowing down has taught me new things about how I live, and so it's great because then I can have this dialogue with my clients, and it's really a slowing down and a real exchange. So I've learned a lot. I gotta say, I've learned. Yeah.
And Raphael, you're not taking your dining room table, transforming your dining room table into an office, I think.
Just bought another house. So didn't
Well, there you go.
I was what we were just talking about it before we were on camera. I really I love my home, and I kind of love working in the office, and I just wasn't having an easy time of combining those two in my space. Like I didn't like the idea that I had to also unwind in the same space that I had, 47 Zoom calls in a row in. Um, so I mean, that was a little bit of a struggle. I got another house in the Berkshires. I was one of those people, but it actually did help because I had no emotional connection to the house yet, and so I've kind of let it sort of evolve. But I think that the whole aspect of learning, I think the key thing is like we're learning to work in different ways. And also knowing, I think, is nice that you don't have to be in the office 5 days a week and the world's not going to end. And you can answer an email in 48 hours maybe instead of 24, and that kind of thing.
Well, we can talk about that later on in the survey. 'Cause we did sort of ask about how the trade practices have changed over the last year, and yeah, I'm hearing, yeah, Zoom has meant actually that you may have 38 of them in a row, but also means you're not hopping on airplanes to meet clients, for site visits or what unnecessarily. So, but let's look at the first slide. So one of the things we learned from the survey data is we sort of ask about what design styles from different decades are expected to make a comeback. And 1970s led the pack with 29% of the vote. And I think, and we're looking here at a room that you designed, Raphael, that I think has a great 70s vibe. So it's not just the makers associated with it, but it's also the colors that are associated with that. And if we go to the next slide, I think we can sort of see that the colors, well, let me sort of look at, I mean, people are always really interested in the colors on our survey, and blues have sort of been, and jewel tones have been at the top of the list for the last several years. But this year, emerald kind of inched out navy blue for the first time. You can see that. But what I think is more interesting and sort of pertains to the previous slide is that sort of the color palette of the 1970s, these sort of burnt oranges and mustards, have really picked up in their popularity in the last year. We're seeing warm earth tones, but the yellow and orange hues were up 13% and 15% respectively over the last year. So I think it's sort of this 1970s vibe. So I'd love to kind of talk to you about like the color vibe, but also just the 1970s, or if there are decades. I mean, I told you both before you joined this, you don't actually necessarily have to agree with all the data that's on these trends, but I'm sort of interested to hear your response to them and also sort of what your own personal or professional take is on these things. So maybe because Raphael, we started with showing your room, maybe we'll let you dive into this.
So I wouldn't, so if I'm looking historically at inadvertently at a decade, it is oftentimes 80s, and that's just because that's sort of when I became aware of almost every aspect of design. I sort of grew up in the 80s, And I started high school in 1988. So I kind of was very aware of things. I would say this is 1970s, by which I'm very interested in like 70s that is suggestive of 80s. So like very advanced 70s. So a lot of this, all the furniture here is from the 70s. I don't know if the effect is 70s. The effect probably feels more 80s to me, or at least that's my aim. But I certainly don't think in a retro way, if that's and I also don't necessarily use elements. I mean, my aim is always contemporary, like what's the most contemporary thing possible, but that also samples from, I would say in our work, probably 60 to 70% vintage and historical pieces, and then mixed with some of our own design, as well as like things that we find and stuff like that. So I can't say that I've necessarily picked up on those trends necessarily, although earth tones by way of sort of organic and like handcrafted, I think I see them as very prevalent things.
We've sort of thought, or I've thought that, you know, perhaps the attachment to earth tones are these sort of warm feelings, are these warm colors, are kind of touching on our need to kind of feel cosseted by the earth in these uncertain times. Maybe I'm over psychoanalyzing sort of our gravitation towards those colors, and a certain nostalgia for the 70s. But I mean, do you find that sort of these earth tones, or I mean, Bridget, what's your kind of connection to the palette of the 70s, or even the pieces and makers of the 70s, or even just the general vibe of the 70s?
Well, I think I very much agree with Raphael. I don't think about it necessarily in those terms. It's more so that I think it's our job to research and to see and take in as much as we can, so that we can present our clients with, you know, every possible, or, you know, just us ourselves having the knowledge of everything that is possible to put into the space, and then making the informed and best choices that we think will best benefit our clients. And so I don't necessarily think of it that way either. I don't think I'm going to pull from this, or pull from this era, or pull from this style. It's more for me about what feels harmonious and what feels good and what will service my clients' needs. And most often I get clients who want a palette that is more soothing with a splash of color. But once in a while I get a client who just wants color, and I feel lucky enough to love both of those approaches, because I genuinely feel like I appreciate all styles and all colors if it's correct, and if it feels right for the space. So when I look at interiors that I love, I don't necessarily think of them in a way like it feels very 70s to me, or very 80s, or whatever. It's just more so about that's right for what this space is. But I pull from everywhere. I mean, it could be a piece that was shown to me by an artist yesterday that they've just finished, or it could be something from the early 1900s. If it all comes together and it's harmonious, I love that. But I do love, like, Pierre Paulin. I do love so many pieces that came from that time. I just think there was so much creativity, and design just really opened up in such a way where everything had been so sort of ornate and very every single detail from the front door, nothing was missed. But I loved this sort of fresh approach that came in with or these organic shapes, or these really cool, interesting designs where they were simple. And it's very hard to do simple. It's very, very hard. We know that even with a good song, that we love, it's probably a simple song, but was really hard to write, right? So, and that's the same in design. And so that for me is more what I'm looking at. I don't necessarily recognize it as that's giving me this vibe or this era. I like a good mashup. I really do. I love a good mashup. Yeah.
Well, I think that's what makes these rooms, timeless and not trendy. Although, Raphael, that room, yeah, by no means do I mean to imply that it was sort of, caught in amber that it was a 70s room, but you know, it has this sort of, it's got a scent of the 70s, and certainly like if we can go back to that image, like the makers, you know, I know we are selling so much kind of leather pieces from the 70s, the Bellini, you know, chairs, or you mentioned Paulin before.
Beautiful room.
Those are Paulin chairs in the foreground that you can't
Yes,
really
they
see.
are. I think it's a beautiful room, really beautiful.
Thank
And
you.
what, if just to sort of put you know, who are some of the other makers in the room, to put you on the spot?
The table is George Matthias, who is this Belgian 70s, who sort of etched on these big pieces of brass, and they all have like black steel bases. They're all very different. You kind of can't see, but they have a lot of variation in color on their actual surface when you look at them. There's a Franz West lamp that's probably also 70s, the chain lamp in the back. The Eileen Gray screen is obviously 20s, so all the way to the left.
Right.
The org lamp by Maison Charles is 70s, but it's on a safe. It's a safe that we found, like some old, you know, 1920s safe, or I don't know when it was from. It's like some old safe. And then that's it was an artist's house, and one of the pieces was an Aaron Young. I don't know if you can see, it's a police line, do not cross. It's leaning up against the
Oh yeah, there it is. Right.
audit, and we didn't know what to put it. So we were like, just lean it up here. Like,
That's great.
Aaron Young meet Eileen Gray. That's, I mean, those are always the best conversations, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I love those swivel chairs too. I can't tell if they're that sort of stainless steel wrapped in.
There's stainless steel in the back, and
Yeah.
I don't know who made them,
Yeah.
to be honest.
That's awesome, but yeah, so beautiful. And again, it's those sort of earth tones, and yeah, it's got a nice 70s vibe, but it's, as I say, it transcends any particular decade. If we can go back, we're sort of jumping all over the place with this data, but just, I think what's really interesting is the bottom, if we can look at the bottom five. I mean, we've been hearing about millennial pink for about a millennium now, but it seems that it's fading from popularity just quickly. Have either of you two ever deployed millennial pink? Somehow I think not, but could be wrong.
I mean, I made a career on millennial pink. I used only millennial pink for years, but I think I kind of trailblazed it. But
we actually owe the whole millennial pink phenomenon to you.
You said it, not me.
That's what we hope these BIDN discussions are going to do, to sort of establish, you know, correct history, make history. Let's go to the next. So this is sort of part of our data point and this is probably going to be no surprise to anyone, but we found that, you know, flexible living spaces are in demand. Again, we're working from home, we're working out from home, we're studying from home, we're, you know, cooking 3 meals a day, 7 days a week from home. So this actually is a beautiful little kitchen from a project, actually your First Dibs 50 project, I think, in a really simple, beautiful house in Malibu that you did, Bridget. And the space, and we don't have other slides of it, but the space is sort of a multi-purpose space. Do you want to talk a little bit about, you know, flexibility and?
Sure, yeah. I mean, this was a really, really fun project because the environment that this house is situated on, the building it's laid out in a way where you get so much light into this space, and you know, the surrounding is all this beautiful, beautiful greenery, and then, you know, you look out in the living room and you can see the ocean. So this was about paring everything down so that you are living in a space that is, every place you look, it's beautiful, but it allows for just sort of simple living and getting back to basics and enjoying the environment outside. And I know a lot of designers, we often talk about bringing the outside in, and that's really what this was about as well. So the colors are subtle and they are inviting and warm and easy, and each piece in the house is a statement unto itself, but it's they're not overwhelming. It's nothing's too big or too grand. It's just all about this easy exhaling lifestyle. When you get into this house, and you open and close these doors, you're just in a space where you can just let go and feel good and become recharged. And so everything was about being easy access, easy, just easy living, really.
So this kitchen sort of opens to the dining area, and I think the living
Yeah,
area is up.
yeah,
So do you
absolutely.
want to talk about kitchens now being, our survey, if we flip to the next slide, we'll see that the kitchen, in terms of what were the most designers had the most requests for, kitchens went up 57%. Home offices went from 28% where they were working on
Yeah,
those last year
that's
to
cool.
66. But let's talk about the kitchen, because and both of you, have you been working on kitchens, or what were the most in demand rooms for you? Or what
Uh,
happened in the last year, and what are you sort of getting approached to do now?
Home office has really been a big one,
Mhm.
a really big one, and kitchens as well, but the home office. And in California, we're very, very fortunate where we have outside spaces. So I've been saying, and this is true, that the outdoors become the new indoor in so many homes in LA. And so it's about making the outside, creating living rooms outside and creating spaces outside that extend so people can feel, sort of less confined or maybe, suffocated, if you will, with not being able to leave. And so it's been, yeah, I would say the outdoors here in Los Angeles and home offices have really been a big one. Yeah. And home offices that we designed before were obviously useful to our clients, but they were, oftentimes just really beautiful. And now, as people are working in them, it becomes like, well, maybe I need to, because they're really working in them, they're seeing how the spaces need to function. And so it's maybe a call that maybe I do need two chairs, opposite my desk instead of just the one, because, originally we put that one there because it looked amazing, but I think I need two comfortable, so it's been conversations like that. And maybe I do need a sofa on that back wall so I can, lay down and read what I need to read or look at what I need to look at. So there's been a reworking of some of those spaces, and and it's been great. It's been really great. I mean, COVID is absolutely terrible, but I think one of the things it's done is made everybody slow down and really become aware of how they function in their homes.
And love their homes, because I
Yeah,
mean, they have no choice, and invest in their homes and make them, as you
absolutely.
say, the home office is no longer just sort of this pretty thing you pass in the hallway that you think you might use occasionally. It's got to do,
It's got to function.
it's got
And people should, your home should be your love letter to yourself. It doesn't matter if it's one room, 5 rooms, 50 rooms. It should be your love letter to yourself. It really should. It should be the place where you can come in and just get to be. It's your diary to yourself. It's all the things that hopefully charge you and invigorate you and enhance you and elevate you.
Mhm.
Just to feel better. We all have so much going on. It's a great to have a space where you can feel better, feel good.
So not just the practical, but the,
Yeah.
the sort of romantic idea of home. And you, Raphael, are you sort of because I know both of you are sort of at the point, you're probably not being hired just to come in and an office. So these are clients who are coming back to you to say, I really need you to change this, or your new clients are really saying, is there something that you're hearing getting more demand for now than you have ever before in your?
I actually, interestingly, this is actually not a result of the pandemic. So this was actually predated the pandemic, but it's a ground up house that we're working on. And we were lucky enough to have a sizable amount of ground up projects going on when this hit, when it did seem like we weren't sure what was going to happen. There was a freak out, right? Like we lost, like all of our commercial projects and hospitality projects went on hold. And we were like, what's going to happen? Luckily, those projects did sail us through. But this one person, um, presented a bunch of challenges to us, and she said, I I want a very, very beautiful dining room that feels very, very special, like far more special than a typical dining room for the 10 times a year that I use the dining room, but I do not want it to be a dining room the rest of the time.
Hmm.
I want it to be a room that I would use every day. So we made it, we basically designed this appendage to the house that feels like you're walking through this bridge, and it really feels like you're walking into a different house. And it is essentially a different building, but the dining table comes out of the floor, and it's basically a three-sided glass room that's a yoga studio most of the time, with like medicine balls and stuff like that. But I always like reference it, even though it was not a result of the pandemic. It's sort of like perfect. It's sort of a perfect pandemic use. Although most people, my dining room became my office because it was the biggest table in my house. And I do think that in my own relationship, I can't say that I can't say that clients, I mean, I won't dispel the demographic that most clients live in, but there's a little bit of a detachment on certain things, right? Like I don't have quite as many people doing stuff for me and stuff like that at home as typical clients. But I did think that one of the nice things was moving, like I would cook more, right? And I would like be cooking something that would take 6 hours on a Wednesday, because you could chop a few onions, saute it, put it on, keep working, go back to the kitchen. And I've noticed that whilst I'm doing my new house in the countryside, and basically like I feel like the whole ground floor is a kitchen, because I'm like, this is it's basically where everyone wants to be. And
Mm-hmm.
when you entertain informally like I do, I never have a chef, I never have people serving or anything like that in my home. Like, I'm cooking, so people are in the kitchen, they're hanging out. So I do think kitchens are kind of growing to serve multiple functions.
I think, the image we showed of Bridget's kitchen before, I mean, you've certainly done more complex and grander spaces, but I think it was appealing for us as an image because it's so light, the wonderful greenery outside, but also the fact that it really does open to the rest of the room. So you can be cooking in there and yet, interacting with your guests. Well, who's had guests in the last year, but we're starting now to be vaccinated and we wear masks, but your family, your close, the people that you're with. So I think that's, why we sort of all aspire to that kind of. I guess the question was: do you think the kitchen is still the hub of the home in this sort of post-pandemic world, or is it the yoga studio?
Both, but I think so. I think the kitchen is very much still the hub of the home, and people are cooking more than they ever have, and discovering how those rooms function as well. And so, absolutely,
But I
everyone's
think
having.
also, one of the things that makes this kitchen so beautiful and such a beautiful room to want to be in is is not having upper cabinets,
Yeah.
which I think is actually, making a kitchen a space you want to be in, as opposed to just utilitarian, is really, I think, if you can sacrifice it, if you can sacrifice the space. But I think that not having, one of that's really what makes this kitchen so appealing, is
Having a super cool photograph instead of upper cabinet storage cabinets. Well, actually, I'm looking at the Q&A and someone saying, with the focus on kitchen, are you guys thinking about designing or how you're sourcing tableware, stemware, plates, because we have open display and it's all out there, is so much more important to style with beautiful things in the kitchen.
Yes, agreed. Agreed.
But no homeware lines coming out from Target anytime soon, Bridget?
No, no, but I love I'm really passionate about what we do, and anything from the front door to the back door, the outside, all of it. I'd love to be involved in that and choosing those things. So dishware and cutlery and all those things. I love that stuff. I love it. And there are so many artists that are doing really interesting and incredible dishware and cutlery and pictures, and they're like forms of art. I mean, and I love that. And so I've been fortunate enough to receive information and people to reach out to me and show me some their work. And that's really interesting with the pandemic, whereas you don't really get a chance to go out as much as we used to, but people are finding ways to reach us. They're finding ways to get us their information and get us to show us their pieces. And it's been, in certain ways, it's been really, really cool. And
And typically,
lots of new vendors, and yeah, it's good.
yeah, typically, do your clients ask you to sort of style down to the plates and the stemware?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
you,
yes.
Raphael, too?
Yeah,
Yeah.
very much so. I mean, more than I'd like to sometimes. Like we're curating family photos and one whole thing right now. Um,
But the good news is that they're saying that they trust you so much and they love what you do so much. They want you, involved in every part of it. So
well, I mean, look, I actually bring up the question. I'm like, I love this surface, but not if you're gonna like put 50 different frames that are all different on it with like your kids' high school graduations on it. So
right.
like, I'd rather you give me the pictures you want to put out, and I'll like figure out where they go. Um,
Right. Yeah.
Great.
I love it. I love it.
Great. Okay, let's move on to the next slide, which, okay, you touched on this before, Bridget, and luckily we have a room of yours. In fact, is this in your own house?
It is, yes.
So let me just so nature comes indoors. So our survey, we found when we asked about patterns or motifs, botanic and organic were the two biggest, sort of data points. People are really gravitating toward those.
Yeah, I agree.
Their selection suggests that nature-inspired patterns are a popular way to bring the outdoors in. Also, materials and finishes. So wood was the most popular. At 34% of the designers said that they're using or they gravitate toward that first, and then natural materials. So, okay, so let's move back to that room because I feel like I want to look at it forever and actually go move into it. So, talk about how the ways you bring the outdoors in. And Bridget, you're lucky you're in Southern California, so it's really easy to do. Well, open up the doors and just bring the outdoor in. But this is spectacular. So talk about talk about this room and the inspiration behind it.
Yeah, so this room, it was a big conversation about what was I going to do with this room, because it's off of my living room, and this room, it just sort of had these concrete floors, and I just was and doors that went outside, and I just kind of thought, what am I going to do with this room? And what I like to do is sometimes, you live in this space and really you really decide on how you want to use a room. And so once living in the house and the sort of empty room that sat there, I saw that, the way the sun came in was so beautiful, and we were always opening those doors. And I just sort of sat in there and had a rug on the floor and would lay on the floor with and just really use the room. And I just thought, look around me. And even though I'm in Laurel Canyon, but where my house is situated, if I open the doors, I'm looking across at another mountain, and it's really beautiful. You almost feel like you're in the Italian countryside, So it's just a room that I want to be in, and so I start by picking, just the colors. I wanted the colors in the space to mimic what I was seeing outside. The room, feeling wise, just was so light to me. It felt good. I felt like I was in Europe, and so that's how I painted the walls, was what I had, seen in Europe and different homes I had stayed in, and then informed what's going to go in this space. And it became all about greenery and plants. And then it just revealed itself to me. It's like, this is going to be the solarium. And I tell you, we eat in there. My Sunday mornings are spent there with my papers and my coffee and my books. And it's just a really joyous space. And it's also a space that allows me to take my mind off of everything as I'm watering my plants and getting involved and talking to my plants. No one wants to see that, but that does happen. I do that. But you know, it's just it's a space that's really inviting and it's unexpected and in a great way. And I really love being in that space. I really do. It's
Can
just
you tell me about the table and chairs?
the table and chairs. Oh, I'm gonna get in trouble here. I picked this up from one of my just absolute favorite, J.F. Chin, and it's an artist. And this looked very much to me like it was sort of inspired by like Walter Lamb, that vibe and feeling. But it's a newer
That's
artist,
contemporary.
and I just loved it.
Mhm.
And the way it's wrapped felt so natural in the space. It's sort of the same colors as the walls and the greenery. And I didn't want your eye to, I didn't want anything to sort of jerk you in any direction. I just wanted it to all feel like one cohesive environment.
Mhm.
And so there's just different greens in the space, just beautiful different greens.
Mm.
And of course, there's a little music in there. You know, I make my daughter.
Yeah.
I told my daughter she will play the piano. So,
How can
and
she
so
not? Such a great room. And
it's
someone commented that the light fixture looks like an inverted fountain, so it's all kind of got this kind of
yeah, yes,
solarium feel to it. Yeah.
and that is from the 50s, which I trying to remember, but I did get that from First Dibs. So I love that. Yeah. I love a First Dibs. I gotta tell you, I love First Dibs. But I did pick the light from there and yeah, I love it.
Great. Okay, so Raphael, how do you bring the indoors? Are you seeing people asking for that, and how do you bring the outdoors in?
Most of our projects have, when they're not in New York, which, 3/4 of them aren't, they normally have significant outdoor, they're centered around views and that kind of thing. I'm very into like views too. So we definitely like always like to privilege view. We're doing a house in Colorado right now, but sort of everything is everything is oriented around this like double height glass wall that overlooks this like mountain range. And it's, it's been manipulating all the spaces because I think that's what you want to see. So it's sort of the main event. And also it does require a sort of really simple design. It's like a good example is the this this hotel in the Aman Hotel in Venice.
Hmm.
Like the hotel, they have a particularly significant palazzo, and they purposefully underfurnished it. Like there's almost like all the furniture is like almost invisible because you're kind of like in awe of this palazzo. I think that if you have a pretty significant natural wonder, you kind of want to do that. I don't in neither of my houses. Uh, I have I don't have anything like spectacular when I look out my window, but I have doors that open onto outdoor areas. My little yard that I get to use for 3 or 4 months out of the year. Um, I don't live in California, I'm afraid. And there's like the laughter of a California native. Like, your 3 month garden.
Yeah. But I'm going to say in the pandemic, people stuck in New York and really, for those months where we really couldn't go out anywhere, just this idea of having, even if it was a gray, cold backyard, I mean, that for so many of us would have, felt like such a great luxury just to be able to step outside safely without a mask and sort of be connected to the outside, So, yeah, and I mean, I think, part of this sort of bringing the outdoors in again is that we find solace from nature, and particularly during really difficult times, it's nice to, as the sort of man-made world of the humankind has sort of screwed things up. It's nice to sort of look to nature and bring it in, especially when the access to the outside was so, um,
So limited.
hard to get to.
Mhm.
And so, um, just someone I know, because we see so much of it, cane and rattan. How do you guys have feelings on those? Because seeing a lot of that sort of garden furniture come in, you using it, and I think you continue to use it?
I actually, I will, I have a hard time with, some things make it indoors, but I do have certain things. In fact, I remember like having this conversation with Suzanne Demisch a few years ago. She had these really beautiful Joseph Andre Mott chairs, and I was like, they feel like they belong in like the chicest garden room ever. You know, maybe they belong in Bridget's garden.
I'll
garden
take
room.
them.
They were really beautiful, but I actually now have this pre-revolutionary house that is really challenging every aspect of design that I've ever had. It's like 7-foot high ceilings and all these things. And I actually am looking to some of that, oddly, because it feels light, and a lot of the period furniture feels so heavy to me. So I'm trying to bring in levity, and so I was thinking that might be an interesting way to bring in levity.
Previously, you thought that stuff belonged outside. It looked like it went in a garden room, but you wouldn't bring it into a living room or bedroom.
Previously I struggled, but you'd see it like in Italy, in Italy where they really excel at this kind of indoor outdoor, right? Like you'll have like rattan furniture on a marble floor, and you're like, this works great here. Like you made it work, right?
Well, everything looks better and tastes better in Italy, so that's just not fair. All right, let's look at one more slide. Okay, so new and artisanal furniture. So if we go now, we'll come back to this image, but let's just go to the data. So we asked our surveillance, what design periods are they sourcing shopping for in 2021? And, antiques is still, strong at nearly half the respondents. But new and contemporary, 75%, and custom items, 78%. And of course, this is not an either or. These are just, they were answering in these multiple categories. 21st century, so that sort of pieces made in the last 20 years that aren't necessarily new. So obviously contemporary design is really hot now, and and I think again it's mixed in with the antique or the vintage material too. Just on the right side, we say, how do you expect the mix of new and contemporary pieces you purchased to evolve over the years? So basically, more people were anticipating buying, and had been buying from artisanal makers. So not the sort of the big, large manufacturers, although that demand is growing, but sort of these small shops and workshops, out of Brooklyn or, East LA or wherever it is, around the world, we're seeing and selling, incredible work from these small artisanal makers. So kind of want to talk to you about, what the contemporary or new and custom, or whatever you call it, custom furniture is that's really catching your fancy now, and how much of it you're incorporating into your projects, compared to even, 5 years ago. Maybe we'll go back to the last slide. So Raphael, you can talk to this room, which is a Manhattan, I think, upper west side, upper east side.
No, it's in Soho. It's actually, and it's actually a showroom. It's a showroom that's sort of purposefully meant to feel very residential, because it's by appointment invitation. I think in terms of custom furniture, we do a lot of it. Almost every upholstered piece we do is our own design. Every large scale upholstered piece, just because they oftentimes have to be so specific. The sofa here was our design, and sort of reacts to the dimensions of the space and how we actually wanted it to be sort of really enveloping and sort of welcoming. I think, again, the effect I think is, my hope is always contemporary. And I think the space, I think this space is particularly worked. I mean, all the walls are plastered. You can't really tell, but they all have this really subtle plastering, which I think just makes the space hum, and it really softens the walls a lot. And we obviously incorporated purposefully things that were artisan made, the Ushi One fan light by Ingo Maurer, the Magistretti table, which kind of always works, like regardless of what decor you're going for, but also feels simple and organic, and so I don't know. I mean, I think that it's nice. It's nice to. I definitely like working with vintage pieces because I always get excited by what the story is of it, or also how meanings change, right? Like, even Bridget was speaking about Pierre Paulin, how Pierre Paulin, kind of meant space age when it was like first designed, and now it sort of does feel timeless and not necessarily future. But I think that's always the aim.
Right. And so, Bridget, you mentioned before that one of the great things of the pandemic is that artisans and makers are sort of coming out to you, and you have the time to actually kind of look at the stuff and spend time. So how much of this are you incorporating into your projects, and what percentage would you say is new and custom versus, it's clear that both of you, the mix is really important, but, contemporary pieces.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting because, like you were talking about, my firm, we've been in business almost 3 years, and during that time, just sort of walking down La Cienega, which used to have so many antique stores, which is in Los Angeles, but it had so many antique stores, and so that was just 3 years ago, and then walking down that same street today, so many of those stores are gone, and the reason being is that if you're only dealing in antiques, the market, it's much harder. It's just much harder because there are so many new incredible pieces, and there's so much. Gosh, I mean, that's one of my favorite things, is to go and view new pieces or to have them sent to me to just to look at. And so you're missing half of this incredible market of all of these pieces that you can customize, or pieces that we create ourselves for our clients because we might not necessarily see what we need. And it's just a huge mix of things. So it's not living in one area only. It is about mixing so much. And right now, where I can't really go out and to see the pieces if they're antique or whatever the case may be, customization is really important. And so I'm relying very much on vendors that I've used to help me customize things, and because then I know so much of what I'm getting. And it's been pretty amazing. It's been phenomenal, and I've loved it. And there's something so great about having something in your head and then having it come into fruition, and having your client really love it and enjoy it. And there's something so great about all of these artisans who are making unique things. I mean, there's no surface that is not designable at this point. You can literally find a toilet that's been done in colors. You can have a toilet made with polka dots if you want to. You can do anything at this point. So it is really fun to see all of these new things, and I think that's a beautiful part of the job, and to have conversations about how something transformed from someone's head and then it was actually made, and it's great. And hearing the artist's stories, and so the pieces have stories. So it's really about the combining of it all. For me, that's my most favorite way to design, is eclecticism. So I think when thinking about those stores that have closed, is very much that they were only going to deal in antiques, and some of those antique stores have now started making their own pieces as well, and it's become a big part of their business, at least 50% of the business. And I think that really speaks to how designers are shopping, and what we're looking for and what our clients are looking for. So
Yeah, we're seeing that among our dealers who sort of made their name as, selling vintage and antiques, that their business is completely flipped. They may have 10, 15 years ago, they may have had one or two artisans. Now it's maybe 80% is new and vintage. But I remember speaking to an art collector several years ago about why he sort of switched from historical to contemporary art. And he said, because you actually get to be in conversation with the makers and understand their process and talk to them and visit studios. So I imagine it's sort of the thrill. Is that true, Raphael, of sort of working with artisans?
It is, and I mean, look, I think also it is. I think one of the things that's also nice about working with artisans is and working with artists and craftspeople is it is nice to help people in their careers, in their current lives, and certainly we benefit from it. So it's nice for us to pass that on as well. So I definitely do like that ability of being able to speak to different artists, and sometimes amazing things come up when we force someone to do something, or like, please, we want you to do it, or whatever. I think interesting things come up. But I will also say, because um, I am looking at 18th century antiques right now, which nobody wants. Nobody wants them. I'm like looking at things. I've even spoken to dealers that are like, that would have cost, 30 years ago would have been $150,000. And now I'm like, and I'm buying it for five. I think that there's also a lot of these things, a lot of the historical, it's just even like houses, right? Like the reason why the house that I got is in such good shape is because it's been lived in continuously. The houses that don't get lived in or don't get used collapse. So I think it's also important to preserve history, and I think that we're in an enviable position to be able to play with both of those things. You know what I mean? I always look at things that people aren't looking at as well, because I think it's nice.
Well, you're getting to my favorite topic, which is the appeal of antiques and sort of the return. And actually, we're really close to the end of the time, but this is maybe like a good jump, to next year's trend survey, or that maybe we're looking at 2024 when 18th century French antiques are the hottest item. Because it's true, I'm old enough at this point to remember when like the Paris Biennale, which was just this sort of mecca of 18th century fine French furniture, FFF at the time. And they start to bring in one or two, Jacques Grange start designing some booths, and everybody, showing this stuff in sort of more contemporary settings. And but as you say, that material, that incredibly made, beautifully burnished, historical material with great stories, is not desirable anymore, has not been. So I guess you as designers and looking to what is next or the future, is it antiques, 18th century and earlier? You say yes, Raphael.
Those things excite me, because I always keep thinking like, what, all the different hands they've sort of been through, and what they witnessed. And I mean, so it's like fascinating, and also, scary, kind of haunted, but all of those things are kind of exciting. And I think when you pair something old and new, I think I speak for most designers, when you successfully pair something old and new, like, it is so exciting in your head. You're like, this is so, and you would never get that kind of tension with two new things or two old things.
That's so great. Yeah. Bridget, is there like a Chippendale table or, Georgian settee in your future?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's no, I don't ever think, oh my God, I'm just never doing that. I'm so open. It depends on, it really is like making a great meal. You just, you have to pick the right ingredients, and, and taste those ingredients maybe beforehand. And so it's a case of, if I think that it's great, let's get it into the house and let's see what it looks like. So there is nothing that I will absolutely say no to. As long as I think it's a beautifully designed piece and it could work, come on, it's coming on Amazon in.
Okay, so that's why you're a First Dibs 50 designer, because you love everything, but we sell a lot of everything on the site, but you filter it through your eye, and you find what's great, or what people maybe are a little not appreciating right now, but should be and will be. And Raphael too, I have goosebumps from what you said about sort of mixing something old and new together, and that being such a thrill for you. So it's such a delight to talk to both of you on this, and I am thrilled to be partnering with the BIDN on this. And so happy that really we started off this series for them with two such enormous talents. And I could sort of, I don't know, we should take a survey. I could do another hour just talking to you both. I'm very selfish, but I think we're not going to do that. And I may now turn this over to my colleague, Brad Thornton from our trade team, to sort of take us to the end of the hour.
Yes, hello. Sorry about that. I'm running it, so I had a little error with that right there. But yeah, my name is Brad, and I'm with our trade team. So I want to thank Raf and Bridget for being with us so much. Fantastic partners to First Dibs, and we really appreciate you sharing your wisdom with us. As a thank you for joining us today, it's my pleasure to share our special BIDN offer with you. First, to help fuel the design obsession, maybe you'll find a fantastic piece like Bridget did for the solarium. We're offering up to $250 off your purchase of $1,000 or more. And we've also curated a special selection of pieces that embody these 2021 trends. They'll be sending this out as well. And this is curated exclusively for the BIDN, so we're super excited. And if you haven't yet had a chance, we absolutely invite you to join the Trade First program with First Dibs. With that, you get access to everything from net pricing, really great inventory, personalized support, and exclusive marketing opportunities. And hey, maybe one day even joining us here in a panel like this one today. In order to join that, feel free just to shoot me an email. It's brad@firstdibs.com. You can also register directly on the website. Just find the trade section and set your application in, and we'll make sure that you are all taken care of. So thank you guys so much for joining us today and for this fantastic panel.
Yeah,
Thank
so,
you. Thank
yeah,
you.
Guys.
This was great, and thank you to the Black Interior Designers Network for asking us to partner with them today. This was a real treat. So thank you all. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks.
Great one.
Everyone, thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye.